Hello, we have saved you a seat. Welcome to episode 49 of Train Station at 8, a video game music podcast. I am your host, Bryan, and joining me today is my brother, Steven. Hello, Steven.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing?
And you have managed to wrangle us quite a panel of guests today.
I can't take the credit for this one. In fact, normally I'm the one running around behind the scenes, sending emails and Twitter DMs and all of that, but I kind of just sat back and let you take this one on.
That's a fair point, but you're the one who originally introduced me to Will and Karl Brueggemann, who are here today. Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing
Howdy.
good. Thanks for having us.
You know, I gotta say, I'm loving your guys' intro. I remember you talked when you were on our show about what it was like hearing us start the show and do the pre-show banter and stuff. It's really fun coming on your guys' show because, you know, I'm an avid listener of you guys as well.
Oh, that's really awesome to hear. Yeah, that's something I really like about getting into the podcast community is like being able to like go backstage, if you will.
Yeah, it's fun.
These shows
Right.
are done. And just how ridiculous people are when they don't know what they're doing. But we're figuring it out here. And joining us also, wait, there's more.
What?
Marty Brueggemann, the third Marcato brother, is here joining us. Hello, Marty. How are you doing?
Hey guys, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for including me and adding yet another brother to your show because you were kind of lacking.
Exactly. I know. We don't give enough credence to the whole brother. The idea of brotherhood on this show, so it is really awesome. We are now 5 brothers strong.
I am honored to have all three of you on at the same time. I think if we've hit a new milestone.
I think this is gonna be a blast.
Yes, the collective musical knowledge here is getting pretty intense. We'll see if we can manage it. Typically, we do discuss what we've been listening to recently, but we have a very special reason for this episode coming together. You guys are putting out an album. Or rather, as this is recorded, you guys recently put out an album, which was a tribute to Super Mario World and Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island, titled Hello World. That's going to be our main topic of discussion today. Do you guys want to go introduce just what that is and what you've been doing?
Yeah,
with it?
we're so excited. So by the time this episode comes out, we would have released it last Tuesday, the 14th. And it's a double album of original music that is inspired by Mario World as well as Yoshi's Island. And what's funny is originally, I would say about like 7 or 8 months ago, we had the idea of just doing a Yoshi's album. That was the original idea because we've loved Yoshi's Island for so long. We kind of grew up with it. And I remember one day I was talking with Will on the phone and I was like, well, what if we did like a double album that was Mario World and also Yoshi's Island? Because that would be fun to do that stuff too. And that ever since that the project kind of, I don't know, just kind of spiraled out of control to the point where we really got excited about having this double album where one side was inspired by Mario World, the other side by Yoshi's Island. And yeah, it's been about a 6-month journey, but we're finally done with it. So we're just so excited to share this with everybody.
Right, and all 3 of you guys worked on this album, correct? It was like a big collaboration project.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. We all worked together, and I mean, obviously we're brothers, so we grew up, you know, sharing and playing music together. But this is actually the first, you know, I guess, official big-time collaboration musically between all 3 of us. Marty did compose a few tracks for Mega Buster, which was our Mega Man album. But this is the first time where we sort of divided all the duties evenly, and it was just a blast getting to work with 3 people instead of just 2, because typically when we do these albums, it's just Karl and myself.
And it's probably worth noting that for someone who's not familiar, we kind of have done a lot of these. I guess if you want to call them homage albums. For whatever reason, we kind of fell into doing these. It was never part of our plan, but we did like a Galaxy one, and then all of a sudden we did an F-Zero one, and before we know it, we have all these homage albums. And this is probably going to be the last one. That's why we kind of wanted to go out with a bang with this one. So yeah, it's just a really fun experience to have all of us collaborating.
So perhaps this album should have been titled Goodbye World.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
I mean,
It's too late.
It's partly because it's based after the good old SNES games, but there's kind of this feeling of nostalgia to these albums when I was listening to them. There's just something really like melodic and like a curtain closing to them.
Well, we
I don't
have
know.
this fascination with trying to infuse nostalgia in new music, in brand new music. We're really interested in the relationship between nostalgia and music. And I think that's really at the forefront of this project, is trying to make brand new music that immediately makes you feel like mushy for some reason.
Well, all the projects really, I think that's sort of a goal. Nostalgia being one of the principal things that we're banking on, that hopefully people are familiar with the games and the soundtracks that we're paying tribute to, and then they end up feeling some combination of nostalgia because it sounds like that, but also excitement because it sounds new and fresh. And I don't know, it's addictive to create, and we just hope that people also enjoy listening to it. But even if they don't, we just have such a good time making this stuff.
Well, it's kind of interesting because nostalgia isn't really seen as a very appealing commodity these days, and so I kind of liked how I feel like we were able to kind of separate, like, okay, well, what is it that we're missing from that era that isn't just sort of like a surface level kind of longing, but there's something about almost like the approach or the philosophy in this case of the composer Koji Kondo. It's like what was it that he offered that was so wonderful that we don't have in our lives anymore? And it's almost like, I guess, that side of nostalgia, which I think really interests us and I think is sometimes kind of overlooked.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think, nostalgia isn't very common these days, and I think Nintendo is one of the primary sources for this generation of nostalgia.
Absolutely.
They're kind of the Disney of this generation.
I believe they've gone on record recently saying that they specifically deal in the nostalgia scene, essentially. It's like as part of their special secret sauce.
And they're like Disney in that they're able to keep reinventing these ideas and bringing fresh life to them, and not just be an artifact of the past, which kind of makes you even more nostalgic because you're still invested in these characters.
And actually, that's something kind of interesting about the albums you guys put out, and something that's a bit unique about them is that you don't necessarily take the old tunes from old games. You more of take the texture and the instruments and the styles, and it kind of feels like you're using the same paints and making your own creations out of them, which is pretty different from what I see most people doing, and kind of taps into the nostalgia thing.
I love the way that you put that, Stephen, the idea of like using the same toolbox or something to create the music, because that really is the goal. For us, we kind of like to think of it as, what if we were tasked with writing the music to Mario World, or, writing a sequel to it, or just like a situation I like to present is, what if there was some copyright issue? They were re-releasing the game, but they wouldn't have the rights to the music, and so you need to write new music that can like step in the place of that stuff.
Right. We're trying to offer our services as sort of like copyright dodgers. So.
Reminds me a little bit. Didn't David Wise have to do something similar for a Donkey Kong soundtrack?
Yeah, he did. Well, that was a little bit of a different situation where, like, just the technical limitations. It was easier for him to write a whole new soundtrack. But kind of piggybacking off what Will was saying about the alternate reality, one thing that we recorded a bonus episode that went up last week where we kind of talked about it on our show. But it's actually really hard to explain this kind of project to a lot of people, because I think there are some people that might have the reaction like, who do they think they are? Like, they're trying to like do Koji Kondo, and it was never the intention, nor would it physically be possible for us to ever like compete or replace that music. It's really just a way for us to honor and to show why we love it so much, and just kind of what is good about the original music, I guess.
Yeah, and I kind of like to think of it as like, imagine you're on the map in Mario World, and that you all of a sudden could like steer left, and there's like an entirely different area to the
I like that.
And so we really wanted to feel like, okay, you're absolutely in the same space, but it's not something that you've heard before. And in terms of like kind of like video game language, it's not a place or a level that you've ever played before.
Right. Something that interests me is how these songs, I don't quite remember if this was the case with your previous tribute albums, but most of your songs like have a 1-to-1 correlation with one of the songs in the game.
most of them, yeah.
True.
Yeah, there's a couple oddballs that don't really have like a companion song, and purposely so. I'm thinking of, like, for example, that chamomile forest map is a completely unique piece that doesn't have a specific inspiration. And there's other things, like, for example, that winter in Mushroomland track.
I was going to ask about that. I couldn't figure it out.
The story behind that? Well, yeah, the story behind that is we knew that we were going to have an overworld theme that was going to be arranged in all these different styles, and we knew this is the most important track in both albums. So actually, all three of us, Karl, Marty, and myself, we all took a crack at writing an overworld theme. The theme that Karl came up with became the title screen, that Welcome to Mushroomland. The theme that Marty came up with became the overworld theme. And the one that I wrote, we turned it into that Winter in Mushroomland track. So that's sort of an example of, we had more themes than we almost needed in a situation. So it allowed us to kind of imagine, well, what if there was a winter level in Mario? And so that was kind of the fun thing, where you almost get sort of two stabs at kind of showcasing what makes the Mario World overworld good.
Right. Is the Slither Snake Sandbox, does that have a correlation? Because that
no, that also doesn't have a correlation, mainly because that is yet another opportunity to do theme and variation, because that's actually a variation off of the winter theme. So the winter and the desert track are kind of companion pieces to each other. But yeah, both of those don't have a companion track in the original world.
Yeah, and Hello World, especially the Adventures in Mushroomland, is very based after reinventing like one theme repeatedly throughout it, or one or two themes, much like Mario World itself.
Exactly.
Like, it must have been very important to get that theme down.
It was very stressful, very important. Yeah, absolutely. Overwhelming, daunting, lots of words.
And that's been a big Mario thing throughout the ages. Like Super Mario 64, like that one theme is like almost the entire soundtrack is composed of that one little song.
Right, and really, that's why we needed to be meticulous about how that piece was going to turn out. Marty, you're the one who ended up writing what we chose to be the overworld theme. Do you have anything to say about it?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it was a little bit of a blur. It was really exciting trying to, I guess, write a piece that could stand along something that is, like, personally for me just so beloved. And I already have some experience trying to kind of go into that same headspace of Koji Kondo, writing kind of music kind of in the sphere of Mario. But with this, it was really important that we weren't trying to imitate any gestures in the actual overworld of the original game. So it wouldn't have quite felt complete if we were just trying to imitate, chord progression and the melody. You'd almost get like a Xerox of a Xerox kind of a thing. And we wanted a piece that really felt like it could really exist on its own, but it captured that same spirit and that same fun. So I guess for me, it was about trying to condense and find just that minimal idea that just immediately took you to that place. And I think we finally got it.
Yeah, and I think compositionally, really, that's what he's talking about. I mean, I'm sure later we'll talk more about the technical side, because obviously instrumentally, it was really heavily modeled after the Overworld theme. But as far as just sitting down on the piano and writing it, I think for a lot of us, it was important for the themes in the album to really stand on their own and to not, try to mimic a specific song too much.
Right. Yeah, I have so much to say about the Jump On In song, and I just found that to be one of the standout moments of the whole soundtracks. But that actually is going to be our song of the episode, so we're definitely going to get to that more in a bit here, as we discuss that more in depth. A question I had earlier that you guys alluded to was how you split up the workload. Like, were you all kind of doing everything, or were you pretty split out into specific roles?
That's a really good question. That's a really important aspect of this project, and I think one of the reasons why it turned out so good. Early on, when we were talking about the idea of, okay, let's do a double album, the first disc World, second disc Yoshi's, for whatever reason, I just immediately had this thought that, like, I really think Marty and Will should take a little bit more of the composing reins in this project, because it's just that kind of music is just so natural to them, and they just write that kind of, even when they're not trying to, they're always writing songs that sound like Koji Kondo, in my opinion. It's not saying that I couldn't do that, but it's definitely more of a natural world for them to be in. So early on, it was kind of my idea for them to write a little bit more of the music, and for me to focus more on the implementation, the technical side of the sequencing, because I really started to enjoy that, especially after my Kirby album last fall. So that was kind of what my ideal world would have been, and luckily these guys were totally in agreement and were really down for that. So for the most part, I took more of the reins on the sequencing end, and the other guys took more of the reins on the composing end. But there's, obviously exceptions to that.
Yeah, for the little bit I've heard of your guys' style, I think you're right on there that I hear so much Koji Kondo, and like also just this show tune kind of vibe. It's a very lyrical,
awesome.
Melodical, happy feeling.
Yeah, I would definitely describe, especially for Marty and myself, the kind of show tune style as being a huge influence as well. Because another thing, as an approach that we take, when you're trying to kind of model what Koji Kondo does, something that we do sometimes is look at his own influences, the music that he was inspired by, and try to study that and try to model that. So you're almost, it's not really a Xerox of Koji Kondo. It's more like two people with the same assignment coming up with different results that may still evoke something similar,
Right. You're not just trying to mimic him. You're bringing your own ideas basically to the same situation he was in. You're not just trying to copy what he already completed.
Yeah, no, I like how you put that. Yeah.
Did you guys ever just psych yourselves out staring at?
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Absolutely. Yeah, I gotta say, ending this project, finishing it, making the last track actually happen was by far the most stressful part of this project, because we were so close, and I think it was about only a couple weeks ago we hadn't even finished that track, and we knew we had this release date set, and the last track was the last track on Yoshi's, that Happily Ever After.
Oh wow!
And for whatever reason, it just was really hard to make that happen, and we went through so many different attempts and so many different themes. So yeah, we definitely psyched ourselves out multiple times.
And in a
sorry.
In a situation like that, you usually don't want to kind of paint yourself into a corner in that way, where it's like, okay, all you have to do is the most emotionally significant and important piece that resolves everything and basically sums up why you're doing the project. It's like, oh, okay. You'd love to be able to have the last track be something where you're not like you guys are saying, psyching yourself out or getting in your head too much. But we got through it somehow.
Yeah, I much prefer when the last hours of my project is just, fixing bugs or kind of, just kind of resyncing things and making sure they're all done. When you have to end at the most creatively important moment, that is very stressful.
Yeah, but other than that, I will say that I think we really rose above any of those initial fears that we had. And there was definitely a lot of feelings of, it was just, this is daunting, this is overwhelming. But I think our excitement, and also having this tripod, being inspired by Will's compositions and Marty's compositions, it kind of motivated me to want to go that extra mile. And I think all of us could agree with that.
Right. When it comes to Happily Ever After, that was a really interesting song for me, because I was listening to the Yoshi soundtrack alongside your soundtrack. So I would find out what song you guys were basing it after and listen to the original and then listen to yours. When I came to Happily Ever After, I was trying to recall what that Yoshi song was, and I listened to it and I'm like, oh gosh, how are they going? They really have their work cut out. Because this song is just beautiful. And
exactly.
So
now you know why we were so stressed out.
Yeah, it's so special. And then I listened to yours, and I'm like, I might like this more. Like, this is so good.
Oh, dude, you're too kind.
I was really amazed by the melody you guys came up for this. It was so beautiful and different, but evoked like the exact same emotional response I got.
That's great.
That is huge because for that one, like, I don't think the paint has fully dried yet. As Karl said, it came together pretty recently, so it's really good to kind of hear that because, I'm not always so sure.
Yeah, that was definitely up in my like top 3 highlights from your whole project. Which one of you worked on that?
So that was Will and I. So the initial melody, like kind of the A theme, that was what I was
melody.
Yeah, so that was what I was responsible for, and you probably don't want to know how many drafts that went through. And then this was one where Will and I wanted to work together because oddly enough, that's not something that we do very often. Or ever, so this is a good opportunity for that. And so most of the other material in that piece are Will's compositions, then he also made the arrangement. And there's one other idea towards the end that was an earlier draft of something I was trying for this, and then the very final phrase that you hear is actually Karl's melody from the first track of the first disc, disc, I'm so old. First Bandcamp page, right?
Oh, that's really cool.
So you kind of have bookends.
And when I first heard that, I was so moved and just honored that was the last thing you hear, because really my melody is the first thing you hear in the first volume and the last thing you hear in the second volume. So it was just very moving for me. And Will's inspiration for that was the way that Koji tagged the Mario 1 kind of level complete. He actually tags that at the end of the Yoshi's ending. So we wanted a similar sense of like nostalgia. And again, can we make nostalgia based on a new album that you just heard? Like, we're trying. Like, who's to say if we succeeded?
And that's my absolute favorite thing about doing these albums. When I was doing Child of the Chozo, I did that all the time, repeating different themes or trying to make you feel like you're at the end of one game and then going into the next game. Like, it's just because I love that experience when playing games, so it's so fun to recreate it. But yeah, Happily Ever After is probably one of the tracks, I'm most proud of. As far as that one, I love writing B sections, and I'm just such a huge fan of Marty's melodies. So it was such a treat to get to like, Marty writes this beautiful melody, and it's like, now I have to take over. And it's just like, it almost felt kind of easy in a way because I was so emotionally moved by what he had written. It almost seemed inevitable where it had to go in a sense. So it was, that one was really kind of a satisfying experience. And also making the intro of it, the really kind of busy thing with the bells and all the crazy strings and stuff, that was fun because I was just trying to recreate my memory of what that experience is like in the game, just sort of this outpouring of emotions and excitement that really feels sort of victorious.
Well, what's fun with that sort of piece is there are a few areas in Mario where there almost seems to be like a bridge to Zelda, where it's like there's a lot of kind of like shared like musical language, and it doesn't happen very often, but like the end credits of Yoshi's Island does feel like it could sit like right next to the end credits of Link to the Past, for example. So it's kind of cool that like we got this opportunity to almost like step into kind of that Zelda like really sincerely emotional place. And yeah, Will he just killed that. It was great.
Well, likewise, man. That was really fun to finally get to work with Marty.
It's very. I was just going to say that it's really, really an awesome feeling to have someone who has your back on a creative project like this. Like just a little example from from Bryan and I, we like to write audio dramas, specifically for our old video game podcast.
Oh, that's so cool.
And so we finally ended that podcast after years and over like 100 and something episodes. And we needed to write like the ending of a trilogy to a Christmas audio drama trilogy we had going. And we couldn't do it. No matter how many times we tried, we couldn't finish it. We were about to give up. And finally we realized the only way we could get to the end and conclude everything and feel satisfied with it was to basically take shifts. I would write until I ran out of material, and then Bryan would write until he ran out of material, and we just did that until we got to the end.
That's really cool.
It is that amazing feeling of, I'm inspired by what you just put down, and so I know where to go with this when you didn't. And yeah, that's a really, really awesome feeling. I'm glad you guys got to experience that.
For sure.
Yeah, I'd love to work more collaboratively and stuff in the future, Steve. Mm-hmm. It's very rewarding when you can get
it's not just any collaboration, it's brotherly collaboration.
Yeah,
there you go.
There's some genetics involved there, man.
And there really is there's an interesting thing about brother relationships. I mean, when you look in sort of like, the arts, there are a lot of examples of brothers, just like working collaboratively, whether it's in film or writing or music. I mean, is something about that relationship. And I guess, you're kind of at an unfair advantage just because there's this common language. You've logged so much time together, and also you're genetically similar, whether you like it or not. And that's part of it too.
Well, for me, one of the things that's cool is I have a lot of experience working collaboratively with just Marty. We've been in bands and have been playing music ever since I have been playing music pretty much my entire life. So I have that history. Mm-hmm. And obviously I have a history just with Will, with all the Marcato stuff, and we've done musical stuff even before that. So now this really feels like the first time when it feels like this true tripod of like trifecta of like having a three-way collaboration. So it's been just a really new and fun experience making this album.
Yeah, and you're age-wise in the middle, Karl?
That's correct. Yeah, Marty's oldest, I'm in the middle, and then Will.
So you bridge the gap.
I try.
The Brueggemann
I
brothers.
try. In many ways, I think that's true.
That's awesome. Steven and I don't have that luxury. Just
we just got to deal with it.
Work it out. But yeah, I mean, the brotherly cooperation, you have the same frame of reference, and they're just additionally there's
a bunch of shorthand that can go on, between people.
And all pretense is down. This person, so you don't really have to worry about balancing how well you know the guy. You just go into it. You can just start creating because you kind of know everything about each other.
Well, you guys should look into recruiting a third brother. I mean, even if. Just so that they can kind of break deadlocks and that kind of thing. It's
exactly.
You guys really need a Marty, someone to occasionally help on the side.
Guys, there's a funny story. When we were trying to figure out what the name of the album would be, this was I don't know how many months ago. We're like, what are we going to call this thing? And we were at Carboni's, which is this Italian restaurant where we live. We were all just sitting there, just throwing out hundreds of titles and so many different options for so long. And what was really funny is Will was throwing out these titles, and Marty was just like, it doesn't make me want to grab it. And that was the biggest thing for Marty is he wanted to just grab it when you heard the right title. And I just thought that was really funny.
Yeah, we were all working hard on trying to come up. We threw out a bunch of different ideas because we needed two, because we needed the first album and the second album. And I remember just trying every combination of different ones. And I remember Marty, and it was after we were all so exhausted, Marty's just like, what about just Hello World? And then it was oh my gosh, also because the pun of that's something people say, Hello World, I'm gonna do this. But then you also get the world from, that was we were probably more proud than we should have been.
I know that feeling. Yes. You're stuck trying to think of a name. We thought Train Station 8 was genius, man.
Dude, it has and that one's subtle. You got to know the backstory.
Exactly. But so yeah, why did you guys end up deciding on the Adventures in Mushroomland and Journey to Dino Island? Was there a lot of deliberation about those names as well?
There was a lot of lawsuits, and so we had to convince.
Well, I think the Dino Island came first. That was a little bit easier of a choice just because, okay, what are some things we have to work with? Yoshi's a dinosaur. Dino. It has to be Dino. Island, we have to say Island because Island isn't copyrighted. Like, so Dino Island came pretty early, and I think Journey 2, that was pretty close. But yeah, Mushroomland was something that it took a long time to figure out what's the location going to be of the first volume.
Yeah. Well, because originally we were thinking that the overarching, we didn't know, Hello World was going to be the name. We were thinking it was going to be something, Mario something, or some hint about Plumber or Super something. And then we were thinking that the first album would be called something World, and the second album would be something Island. But then when we came up with the idea of doing Hello World as the overarching thing, we needed to make sure that the first album kind of painted the picture of a more traditional Mario experience. So that's where the whole Mushroomland thing came into place.
Which makes sense because technically the location of the first game is Dinosaur Land. So the land does make sense there.
Yeah, and in the first game, the first stop on the map is actually called Yoshi's Island. So it's like, it gets to be a little confusing.
Right.
I was confused myself. I'm like, where does Super Mario World take place? Because it's on Yoshi's Island, but Yoshi's Island is just like a part of the overworld, I think.
The Mario lore is really deep.
Yeah, you guys must have really done
a lot of continuity problems.
Poured over maps.
Are you guys suggesting that the Mario mythology isn't airtight and like super?
So some plumbers from Brooklyn fell through a portal.
Wait for Mario Historia to come out.
Right.
All the Mario games in chronological order.
Yeah, it turns out Mario 64 takes place in the universe where you die in Mario World. But then if you succeed in Mario 3, that's where, the whole Galaxy games come into play.
And if you go into the minus levels, that's where you get Mario Land.
Yeah.
Those games are weird.
Oh, totally. I mean, I don't know, guys. The movie, I think, still makes the most sense. In terms of
yes. That is all consistent. Mario, and Luigi Mario. Yeah. You can't beat
Genius.
that. So were there any moments or songs in particular that you guys were just especially you view as the peak of the albums?
That's
that you just
that's hard to say.
Let's go around all three of us.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea because I think for all three of us, we're going to probably talk about the other person's contributions because really the advantage of working with three people is that in some ways we're able to be big fans of the album because it's I feel like I'm a fan of the album mainly because I get to hear Will and Marty's compositions that I can objectively say these are really good. So it's not just patting myself on the back. So I guess for me, some of my highlights, obviously, I mean, when I heard that Overworld, that Marty's contribution to the main thing, it was so immediate and catchy. So that was obviously a big one. I'm a really big fan of the bonus stage in Adventures in Mushroomland. Just kind of this Hollywood, just like Will likes to call it Las Vegas. It just feels like you just see the lights. So that was definitely, for me, that was the track that I'm definitely the most proud of the sequencing. I just really poured a lot of heart. I wanted to really make that come alive. So that one, I just love so much. And as far as the second one, I would say for me, it probably has to be The Athletic. Which was Try to Keep Up. That was one that I had just been looking forward to Marty writing for so long. So because I'm such a big fan of
you're talking about the Dino Island Athletic.
Right. The Athletic to the second one. Because I just love Dixieland and I had just been looking forward to that because that's one of my favorite tracks that Koji has ever written. So those two are probably my personal favorites, I'd say.
Yep, those are some good picks. That was another one of those songs, and I'm like, man, they have a legacy to live up to here because this song is just weirdly good and out of left field. So it's a really cool style to try to emulate. What about you, Will?
It's hard to say. I mean, I've really grown fond of everything, which I wasn't necessarily expecting that I would love every track on the album, but I really think I do. Something that, let's see. Obviously, Overworld is great. One thing on the boat, Karl wrote. There's two title screens. The title screen, the first album, and the second one. Those are both Karl. Well, the first one is Karl and me, but I wrote a little tag thing at the end that's separate from the. The melody is Karl's, and I love it. I think it works so well. And he also did the track called Down on Dino Island. Which I also absolutely love. As far as things that I've written, I was really happy with how the boss theme turned out. on the first album, because that was a track where looking at the original was very kind of daunting, and I didn't know how I would go about writing it. And I'd also say the lullaby theme, the first track of the second album, was one that I wrote, and was one that just was inspired by real life events, because our sister actually had a baby, and so I wrote that as a lullaby for our nephew before he was born, but it just so happened that it really sounded a lot like Koji Kondo.
And when
like
it came time, for the project to have that track, I think both me and Marty were just like, Will, you gotta use that theme you wrote, because I can't imagine you writing a better lullaby than that, so it really worked out.
Wow, yeah, it fits so thematically in this that I had no idea it had an origin in another project. That's amazing. Fits in.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'd say. Yeah, I think I like. But yeah, I'm just really happy with how everything turned out. What about you, Marty?
Man, it's hard to pick. Oh boy, and I don't think I'd be inclined to single out any of the tracks I worked on. But I've got to say, there's a track in the first album, the Chamomile Forest. I think Karl alluded to it, and that's another one where, in like the forest themes in like Super Mario World, also are like a bridge to kind of that Zelda space.
That's a really good point.
And so Anyways, what Will put together there, it was just honestly, it just really blew me away, and it almost felt like, oh my gosh, what kind of album are we making? Will touched on it, but I'd like to say a little more. There's like a title screen on the second album that Karl wrote for like the Dino Island, and God, not only is it like so good, and it just like it really sticks in your head, but honestly, I felt like there was an entire world of this game, and it was just like becoming clear in front of my eyes as I listened to it. And a cool little tidbit is it opens with these sort of like SNES sounding like ocean sound effects and everything. And what's cool is if you go back and listen to the Yoshi's track that we're kind of trying to honor here, it's different sound effects. And so I was like, I didn't realize that when Karl was sharing it before. And then I was talking to him like, well, how did you do this? And he's like, well, these are from like other games like Chrono Trigger and Earthbound, I think. And it's like, I don't know, I just really appreciated that like attention to detail in trying.
Oh wow, yeah, you didn't just rip from the original track.
It's a combination. There is some from the original, but it's also combined. It's fused with a couple other games as well. So because I wanted it to be, to live on its own too.
Yeah, I really appreciated that song as well. Down on Dino Island there's a very unique, like, tropical grooviness to that opening.
Yeah, and it was so rewarding because that original Yoshi's Island title screen is really kind of an oddball. Like, one thing I'll say about my compositions, I did more on the second album than the first, and I only did the oddball tracks. Like, really.
Did you do the Caves of the
I did that, and I also did the final boss. So anything that doesn't sound like the rest of the album is me.
Yeah, basically any other, like, the groovy rock kind of stuff is where you come in and apply your
I suppose.
And it's so interesting hearing all three of you, like, come in with your personal favorite moments and tracks that were special to you for some reason, because I've listened to this, 2 or 3 times in preparation.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And I've been kind of, dreaming up my own hypothesis and trying to figure out, well, I bet Karl worked on that one, and that has Marty all over it, and it's really fun to hear. I did want to mention though that Marty mentioned before the Chamomile Forest map track.
Yes,
that was one that stood out to me.
Great!
Largely because it has this kind of sense of tragedy almost.
You know what the working title was Forest Tragedy.
There you go, man. I nailed it.
It's also nice for you to say that, because when you were coming up with the titles, maybe I'm remembering this wrong.
Will didn't agree,
but I felt like Will was saying, like, guys, it's not a tragedy.
And we're like, I think.
Well, no, I'm the one who called it tragedy. I just didn't want to call it sad. I think of it as more like mysterious.
Yes.
I agree with tragedy. I just don't want to call it sad.
I just don't agree that tragedies are sad.
Not necessarily. Tragedies are more like powerful and beautiful. I don't know.
Now I'm getting deja vu.
Maybe it's that it's more like it's kind of tinged with tragedy.
Yes.
It's really
right.
just it's a forest that is magical and mysterious, but you don't just walk into the forest and suddenly
Yeah, see guys, Steven's on my side. He knows what I'm talking about.
There's a deep mystery to it that just reminds me of what Nintendo honestly did with their games. They've not done it as much recently, but I think they're really good at, but in like the SNES and N64 era, is their games had like this sense of like wonder and depth to them that was, I think, pretty unique to that era. Stuff like A Link to the Past or a little bit
the elegy from Ocarina of Time and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I really think you capture that with this song, and that's something I really appreciate about Nintendo and some of their soundtracks in the past.
Yeah,
they aren't just always happy fun.
Well, yeah, thanks. That was one. That's probably one I do have kind of a strong emotional connection to, because that one, was kind of just separate from the way the other ones worked. I mean, I originally wanted to make something like Forest of Illusion. But then I kind of, I was running up against a wall of like that piece is so specific. I don't think I can really compete, but I was kind of also at the same time soaking up, that type of harmonic language that he uses. And just, I don't know, having loved Koji Kondo and particularly, loving Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time and all the Zelda music, that just some of the contours of that melody, once I got going, I knew exactly where I wanted to take it.
Right. So you may not have an answer for this, but I'm curious, is there anything on the album that you guys, like, if you did it over again, you'd want to change? Like anything coming out of it that you guys weren't quite happy with?
I think that they should have called it Tragic Forest.
No, I want it to be Sad Woods. No, I'm just kidding. There's something on a technical level that it happened very early on in the project. One of the first tracks that the first thing I sequenced was Marty's Overworld theme. And I was a little bit too eager to start working on it, to the point where Marty didn't necessarily agree with the tempo that I chose. So we actually had to, on that track, after some of the work was already done, on Reaper, which is our DAW that we use, we actually had to kind of stretch the time a little bit digitally. You can't really tell, especially because with these SNES samples, everything's stretched anyway. So I'm sure most people will never notice, but just
it's a little bit faster.
But my
than it was
ears,
originally
I kind of wish I would have waited and done it in a little bit of a different way. It's hard to explain, but that's probably the only thing for me.
I totally get you. Basically, you had the entire file and you basically just had to make it did you make it faster?
A little bit faster, which sounds better than slower.
Okay, gotcha. So you basically just created the whole thing and made it a little bit faster.
If anyone is this nerdy, I don't know if anyone's interested, but basically what I did is I did that with the whole song except for the steel drum melody, because I just couldn't live with myself, because I wanted that to sound perfect. So I muted that and then increased the speed just slightly on the rest of the song, and then resequenced just the steel drum melody. So that sounds perfect, pretty much.
Right, because you'd notice a little bit more if those were like long. They have that really punchy sound to them, so you want them to all not be stretched notes. That's really interesting. Okay, that's a much more interesting, like, specific answer to that question than I was expecting. Like, you have a specific thing you want to change. So when the remastered album comes out,
we'll see.
When the remix album comes out, where you add dubstep to have.
Oh my gosh, that's around the corner. No, we do have something we're thinking about. I don't know if we should talk about it, but we do have kind of a companion project we're thinking about for Hello World.
Oh wow, that's super cool.
Yeah, let's see. Let me think about anything that I would want to change. I mean, honestly, it's all so new, so maybe it would take me more time, because I mean, I'm really happy with how it turned out. All the tracks. I think there's probably not anything that like I really want to change, but there were some things that were more difficult and frustrating than I would have wanted. Like the sequencing of the lullaby. Well, the sequencing of the lullaby, that was one that I did myself, because those samples were really frustrating with the intonation. It got to the point where each individual note I had to separate into its own file and make separate EQ passes to EQ out, because there was this weird overtone that was really
And that was
dissonant.
something unique to just that sample. Luckily, we didn't have that issue with almost any other instrument. It was just that music box. And
I mean, at least it was a slow song,
right?
So there weren't as many notes as other songs.
But it was kind of funny because it got to the point where. Because I sequenced the Happily Ever After, the last song, and it got to the point where I was like, oh, Will, what if we use that music box instrument? And he was like, no, dear God, no.
Let us never speak of that instrument.
It sounds so innocent.
It's funny to imagine the guy with the music box just hating the music box.
It brings no joy.
Just like cursing up a storm.
Well, see, that's the thing. I loved the timbre of the instrument, and it's like one of my favorite Nintendo moments, the original da 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 da. And the piece itself musically, the one that I wrote, really meant something special to me. So it's like that was my dedication. I'm like, I really want this to sound good. But if I show you the original version, you guys would think it's crazy because first of all, none of the notes sounded in tune, and they all had like an overtone that was like a fourth higher. So it just was like, ooh, the whole time. It was really uncomfortable. It's like polytonal.
I really appreciate about how you created the song. I don't remember if this was in the original version or not, but you know how when it starts you have like the cranking of the music box?
Wind up, yeah,
and then mid song, like when you do that scale up, they're kind of like these slower, longer
and
notes.
The original just had the music box cranking through the whole thing, right?
Right.
I think so.
Like you could tell the music box slowed a little bit to do those slower notes like crescendo, and then you crank it again and it starts over. Like that was a really neat touch to
cool,
make it sound a little more like material and physical, and not just like a digital.
Well, I wanted to do it because Karl had ripped the sample of the music box crank sound, and so I'm like, I should probably use this. This is kind of a cute little thing.
Right. Yeah, I really liked its placement in the song because it was right after the notes got like longer, so it sounded like the music box was slowing down there, and it was a very cool little touch.
Well, and there's something fun about that combination of like really dedicating yourself to realism, but like you're within the parameters of like a very like limited technology. I guess like kind of relative to where we are now. I don't know. That combination is just super exciting.
Right.
Yeah, I think like sound design back in the old days would have been really fun, frustrating but fun to try to figure out like how can I mimic this very like complex sound with this very
and it's all in the little details. It kind of reminds me of something that I think Miyamoto said years ago, which was something along the lines of, what would be more realistic, to have a hand have all 5 detailed fingers and then, clutch a bat and swing it poorly, or to just be a block of a hand but have a really convincing animation as it swings?
Right.
That always just kind of reminds me of working with limited technology, or limited resources. It's all about how you do it and all about those small touches that you put in that make it come alive.
And that's something I really appreciate about these albums. I'm sure you guys are aware, as music creators now, we have so many tools at our fingertips that it can be easy to get like so caught up in how like bombastic and intricate you can make your music that you lose sight of the melody and the basic composition. And these kind of albums, you really have to have a strong melody for it to work.
Yeah, I mean,
so it really gets you to focus on the basics.
If we were able to, in this project, come up with good melodies, I think we were, but I'm not going to say that. If we were able to, it was due in large part to the limitations we had, thinking about, okay, we only have this many voices we want to use. Because, yeah, we could have technically sequenced like a 13 voice SNES song, but it wouldn't have sound authentic, because when you have too many voices, it starts to just not sound like Super Nintendo anymore. So the fact that we had those limitations, and also we had kind of a world that Koji already established, I think those limitations really led to better melodies, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Marty, was there anything from that last question that you would have wanted to change from these dual albums?
I mean, for me, it would almost be healthier to approach the question kind of in the opposite way, because I'm constantly kind of living in kind of like self-doubt when it comes to working on music. It's like, no, like it's, I mean, I'm really hard on myself, and just really like going back and forth between kind of like micro and macro details. So for me, it's been almost an experience of like really trying to listen to the album again and again, and I'm finding like, oh no, this is working. Embrace it. So yeah, I guess I'm in a little bit of that space right now. But if I were to open it up, I mean, there are always things, but
we're not going to let Marty answer this question. It's not what he needs right now.
I gotcha. Okay.
But no, I do want to say I'm really proud
of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, default, you're like, default, everything needs fixing. You've been trying to go past and say, oh, wait, maybe this doesn't need fixing, and maybe this doesn't.
But see, this is the good thing about having 3 people. You know, we can prevent that from happening because Marty is very kind of self-critical and stuff.
Which is super useful in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's one of the things that makes him a really wonderful and meticulous composer. I mean, it's the reason why his melody, I think, is the one that we chose because it didn't just come out perfectly the way it is, you know. I think originally he came up with something slightly different than that and kind of worked to retool it into what it is.
I'd like to talk more about that whole song, the Overworld, and kind of how that came to be, because that was definitely a really important kind of starting point for the project.
That's really good timing, so let's jump on in here and play that song for everyone before we go in depth to talk about it. So everyone enjoy the main theme from Hello World Adventures in Mushroomland. Jump on in, the Overworld theme, composed by these fine fellows here, Karl, Will, and Marty Brueggemann. All right, that was Jump On In, the Overworld theme from Hello World Adventures in Mushroomland, composed by the Super Marcato Bros, who are here with us right now. So, guys, how would you, just tell me about the song?
I kind of want to just start talking about the history of how the song came to be. When we started off with the project, I think the first thing we did is we opened up Microsoft Word and had the idea of, okay, what songs...
You want to start a project with Word, guys. You got to do it.
What songs do we want on the project? Obviously we want an overworld, an athletic, an underwater, all the different types of songs that we're going to, and then we pretty much, I don't know if we divided it at that point. I think what we did is we realized, okay, guys, I think we need to start off with deciding on a main theme of the first project, the overworld theme that we're going to do all these variations. So we had the idea of why don't all 3 of us submit our kind of try our hand at writing an overworld theme. So that's really what we did. And like Will said earlier, my submission ended up being used as the title screen. Will's submission ended up being used as the winter and overworld. And we used Marty's submission. And so all of us texted each other a voice memo of us playing it on the piano. So yeah, if you listen to Marty's demo of him playing the main theme, everything's there. I mean, the melody's there. It has this really kind of fun, kind of plucky left hand, which turned into the bass. So yeah, that was a really fun moment to hear that. And in a way, as soon as I heard it, I kind of realized, it has to be this theme.
And then at the tail end of the voice memo, I just give them like a little taste of like how maybe you would interpret it for like a underwater waltz or like a castle. Because that was kind of another parameter in writing the overworld. I mean, maybe it didn't have to be, but you kind of couldn't like erase that out of your mind that you'd eventually be making these variations to it. So it would have to sustain those, and it would also be nice if the variations felt a little bit different than what Koji did in Mario. So luckily, I mean, I am really proud of the melody, and it did take quite a bit of work, almost kind of like whittling it down and kind of shaving it down to what feels almost like a ringtone to me now.
Right. That's something that really impressed me about the melodies. Even like a couple listens in, I was able to like perfectly recall it and even found myself like humming around the house.
Well, I think one of the things about the melody that lends itself to having these variations, and for me, what made it so instant is there's a lot of space rhythmically. The bum, bum,
yep,
ba-dum, ba-dum, but there's a lot of space, but the rhythms that are there are very striking. And I think that was the thing that hit me first about it. And I think that's one of the things that's effective about it.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. It's
sorry. Like my brothers, and I'm assuming like you guys and like a lot of the world, I'm just crazy about the Koji's Overworld theme. And I guess it got to a point when working on it where all of a sudden I thought, like, what if instead of trying to make something that is, kind of rivaling that, I almost go the other direction, something that's like even more elemental and simple. And
that's a really,
I don't know. It was really grateful that it happened. In some ways, it just felt very Mario, that aesthetic and that philosophy. It kind of takes me back to like the original Mario game and Mario 3 a little bit.
Well, something that I found interesting in all of our attempts, all three of us started our melodies on the same interval, which was the fifth. Because Karl's is da 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 da, and mine is
on the same pitch.
Yeah. And sorry, not the same interval, the same like scale pitch. And then Marty's is da 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 da, which is interesting because Koji's starts on the third.
And as you guys know, there's only one correct way to write a melody. So luckily, we all got the right answer.
All of the above.
No, but I just thought it was funny that none of us, because that was something where it's like if you start on because his isn't da 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 da. I think it's like somehow that made it feel like. Because I made a couple drafts of like attempt at writing an Overworld, and anytime I would try to start on the third, it just like immediately seemed too close to his. Here. So I thought it was funny that we all kind of approached starting on the. So
yeah, that's definitely an important thing to talk about. This song and also the whole project is one of the struggles is trying to stay away from certain similarities as far as intervals and the way that melodies start. So that was kind of a really important way that we started melodies. Like, okay, I can't do this because it's too close,
Right, because everything else about the song, down to the instruments, are so similar to the original. Like you're trying to evoke a similar feeling. You're using literally the same samples. Right. You're trying to get like the same tempo. The melody is really where you guys differentiate yourselves with this stuff. So if that sounded the same, it would start to just sound, like a remaster or a remix. Instead of an
for me,
song.
One of the most striking things about Jump On In was that it feels much more meandering and kind of slow and happy-go-lucky than the comparison.
Exactly. You're so right. And actually, that was one of the reason why I had it even at a slightly slower tempo. I really liked Marty's demo. It was boom, jink, boom, jink, boom, jink. It was almost just you're like a fat man strolling down the street at a really slow pace. And I really liked that relaxing feel about it. So, maybe Marty would have wanted it a little bit faster, but I really like that it's like a little bit on the slow side.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that I thought is this song needs lyrics. Like it sounds like it's meant to be sung.
Oh,
like
be my guest, guys.
Don't ask me to do that. And this is one of those songs that I thought to myself, this has got to be Marty. Like, I don't know a lot about your music, Marty, to be perfectly honest. I've listened to more of Karl and Will's, but I know you were really, really involved in the Fireflower musical.
Right.
And to me, this kind of sounds like it could fit in with that. Maybe that's why I think it needs lyrics so much. It just has that kind of, that tempo, that kind of show tune, happy-go-lucky style that it's
it's such a friendly song.
Friendly, that's the word I'm looking for. It's really just fun to listen to.
Oh god, that's great, guys. I mean, I think it's like some of my favorite melodists, like instrumental melodists, like like a Koji Kondo or John Williams. It's like a lot of their great melodies really are kind of almost like vocal melodies. I mean, not exclusively, but I think sometimes we can really get kind of bogged down and fall down a rabbit hole when working on music. You guys alluded to earlier, just all of the technological tools that we have to kind of produce music, and we can kind of get lost in that. But, we can easily get lost, like even just at a piano. It's like, oh, I have all these keys and then I should play a lot of notes, right? And isn't that what makes things impressive? And I want to impress people. And it's kind of nice having these reminders from these other great melodists where it's like, okay, but how do you leave a lasting impression,
Yeah, and what's interesting for me is, although I love that theme, I will say that maybe my favorite part of the song is actually the B section. It's always just been the part that won me over when Marty first played the demo. Is when he played that B section, that was like, okay, and I love this. And that's the part that, what we call it, is the kalimba instrument. It's harmonized. It's a little bit more like staccato. And it was really fun. Yeah, to use that instrument, but just the melody that it was playing, that was a moment when I was sequencing, I was like, this feels so natural. Like, I can't believe this hasn't already existed before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was when the B section came out that I'm like, oh, this isn't just a good melody, but it's like, it's following up. Like, this is just Mario, an entire Mario song. Like, it flowed so naturally from the A section to the B section that I was also really, really struck by that.
And I don't know what terminology to use, so forgive me, but it's that connecting piece right before the loop.
Yeah. The little solo. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the little solo.
Oh, what's funny?
I noticed that the song.
That was
really makes
cool. That was a late addition that Marty made on the MIDI that he sent me. Originally, he didn't have that in the demo, and that was something that Will wasn't quite sure about when he first heard it, just because he wasn't expecting it. But I think once we all kind of maybe took a little bit of time to get used to it, I think right now we all love it a lot.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that the other day because I was just having that song in my head all the time, and then getting to that part, I'm like, I really love that little solo. And I think it's the kind of thing where what's great about it is the more times you listen to it, the more you like it. And I think good video game music really needs a mixture of something where that's something that's immediate and something that grows on you. Because you need a mix of both, because you need it to be immediate, because obviously that's what makes something catchy. But also, you need something to grow on you, because that's the type of stuff that keeps it interesting, so that when you hear it looped again and again, you don't get sick of it.
So, like, the first time, it's a nice little surprise, and the second time, you're like, oh yeah, that little bit. And then by the time you're listening to it 3, 4, 5 times, it's part of the song, and you.
Well, to me, I always use the example of "Ahead on Our Way" from Final Fantasy. I think it's 5. But it's the da 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 da. It's this weird thing where the first time I heard it, it's in a major key, and then it just becomes minor all of a sudden, and it's like really shocking and strange. But that's the thing where it's like every time I would listen to it, I'd be like, that kind of works, and then pretty soon, over the years, it's become my favorite part of the entire thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I often find music that I initially dislike will go on to be some of my favorite music, because it has something I'm not comfortable with already. I don't just expect, and so it kind of broadens my horizons more and makes me appreciate it more.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, the solo was like a funny spot because really, I guess I was operating on kind of like, my memory and like my feel around that track, where the original track, there isn't really a solo. What it is it's like it kind of replays the A, and there's some other instruments in the background kind of like riffing a little bit, and it's like a little bit of a variation. So I know, like, when I first delivered it, I think the guys were like, oh, okay, but why is there a solo? But I think I think that actually touches on one of our philosophies too in making this project, where it's like, I think operating on your strong memories of the source material is just as important, sometimes almost more important, than getting like really surgical and like trying to kind of mimic exact details. And I don't know, it's kind of a fascinating concept.
Yeah, because that kind of allows your subconscious creativity has kind of been working on the song in your head for a while, where when you listen to the original, now you have to be, worried about carbon copying specific parts of it. I can definitely see how memories would allow you to be a little more creative than just listening to the original bit. Something else, you mentioned a song jumping into minor, Will. I assume you guys had to take this song in a minor key for some of the remixes, or the what would you say, reuses of the theme throughout the album, right?
Yeah. The Fortress was the big minor one, yeah.
So, what was the process like for that? Did that really factor into the writing of the song? Were you pretty happy with how you were able to remaster it for these different...
Well, yeah, like we said...
all the versions were kind of interesting because one of our initial goals is we wanted to make sure that the person whose ever theme we chose, that other people would get their hand at making some of the variations, just to make sure that they could all be as different as possible. So the Athletic, which is just sort of like a ragtime variation, that was one that I did. The Underwater, which is, a waltz version of the theme, that's one that Karl did. And then the Castle is one that Marty did himself, which I thought was just really perfect and fitting, since the first and last iteration of that theme, are his. I just thought there was something kind of fitting in that.
Oh yeah, that is pretty cool.
That's
so
right.
What did you think about when creating the Lower the Drawbridge, the Fortress theme, Marty? What were your parameters for this? Because that was a really original and interesting piece from the original Mario.
Yeah, it really was. When we first kind of divided who was going to do what track, I had these competing emotions. One, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be able to get to do almost all my favorite tracks. And then the other emotion was like, oh no, those are all so great. I can't touch them. And Karl mentioned before, it's really difficult to find that line because we want these things to stand on their own, but we also want to kind of honor Koji Kondo. And so that initial voice memo of the piano, I played a little bit of a minor phrase, and it's sort of what you hear in the Lower the Drawbridge once you get to kind of this boombastic kind of section, and it was almost more of a tango kind of rhythm. But that was one where it was I was kind of putting it out of my mind because I was going to really psych myself out, and it finally I couldn't really drag my heels anymore. So like Will was saying, kind of going back almost to the things that would have inspired Koji. So it's really almost Baroque in kind of early romantic or pre-romantic kind of classical music. And almost then kind of turning off my thinking about Koji's piece, and then just really trying to take this as a full-on variation of the Overworld.
Which I am so glad that he did that, because one of the things I was very worried about before I heard the track is I was I really don't want this to just be a poor man's world castle theme, because there's so many ways you could just do a digga 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 and just change the arpeggios, and I'm so glad that it's so different and it's so of its own, and that's I guess what I'm the happiest about.
Well, I really like how it kind of forges its own identity with the tempo slowing down to such a dramatic pace around
cool.
1 minute.
It reminds you a little bit of the airships from Mario.
Oh, awesome!
Yeah. It does. It kind of has that whole Baroque thing.
Militaristic,
definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this project, we definitely made use of a lot more tempo changes than anything we'd ever done. For one reason is because you hear a lot of that stuff on the SNES. That was very doable for those composers to have the tempo changes with the samples. So we definitely wanted to take advantage of that.
Yeah, that particular the way it would sometimes work is whoever was composing the track would also kind of make a MIDI arrangement and then pass that along to Karl. So I felt a little bit bad because when I passed along that MIDI, he was like, "What?" Because there were just so many tempo changes, and those actually can be kind of a hassle to work with in your DAW. But no, yeah, Karl did an awesome job with the sequencing, and it was a lot of like kind of final little details as we went through some different drafts, and finally we're like, "Oh yes, I feel like I'm in a castle now," and I'm kind of scared.
Yeah, and one of my favorite things to do in the project is to find the moments where we can utilize the delay, the same kind of delay that Koji or a lot of these SNES composers would do. And really what it means is you take a melody and then you basically copy and paste the same thing to another track and slide it over to the right. And that's exactly how they did it on the Super Nintendo. And you turn the volume down a little bit. And so it's a really simple, primitive way to make it sound like reverb, to make it sound like it's this big space. So there's certain tracks when it's really useful, the castle being one of them. So it's really fun to have those moments where it feels like this big kind of epic space.
Yeah, that song I think was another one of the standout ones for me. I know I'm saying that a lot, but it is in like the top 5
and
for
it's
me.
one reason I enjoy talking about the albums you guys put out is because they kind of act as like a lens to then re-examine the original material.
That's exactly what we wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard Mario World soundtrack 1,000 times. I love it. But, seeing like the same instruments, the same style, and then, brand new from the ground up melodies makes me realize, oh, well, why does this sound different now?
Yeah.
It's like, because the original did this.
And it's such an opposite way of approaching the idea, because most people say, okay, I want to bring attention to this. I will take the original melody and bring it to modern instruments, or bring it to electronic or a different style with the original melody. You guys are like, no, we're going to use this literally the same instruments and literally the same style, but make it melody.
It's not,
and that's
Bryan, it's not until you just explain that to me that I realize how crazy we were to do that. Like, why did we, it's crazy.
It's just like inverted.
Yeah, it's like the Bizarro
remix
remix
really cool.
or something. It's like
It's so rad. But on that note, Karl, I'm going to give you a little time to shine here, and just like, what was the process like for like getting these sound files together?
Oh my gosh!
Just get as detailed.
Okay,
as you want.
yeah.
I'm definitely interested in it, but like, what was
this
it
is
like
definitely my kind of definitely biggest area in the project was the sequencing and the samples, and basically what it started off with, and it's something I've kind of perfected the kind of the process as I've done more. We did our 0G, which was our first attempt at SNES, which now, looking back, we would have done it a little differently. The Kirby project, I made a lot of progress, and I'm really happy with how clean that sounded. So the first step with this is to take the SPC files of, let's say, Mario World, and to really methodically go through every single track and solo all 8 of the channels for every single song to find every possible different sample. Let's say we're going to start off with the kalimba. You're going to want to get low samples. You're going to want to get high samples, long notes, short notes. Go through all the songs and just kind of rip all the samples you can. And then once we have all those samples, we have each one is its own wave file, and then we can use our own sample player to manipulate it, to pitch it up and down in a similar way that the Super Nintendo would have pitched the samples up and down.
Well, and when Karl says sample, he doesn't mean like sample in the hip-hop term where you're taking like a musical phrase. He literally means having to find moments where it's just one sustained
so for
note.
example, let's say the instrument we call soft pipe, I don't know what anyone else would call it. It's pretty much the most common instrument in Mario World. It's used for almost every song. It can be used in some ways. It sounds like strings. It can also sound like brass. It can sound like a synth. But basically, let's say we find an example of the note being da. You'd rip that note, and then you'd be able to pitch that up and down. But one of the struggles is that if you pitch it up, the rate increases too. So da turns into da, and that doesn't sound good. So that's why you need to find multiple samples of different ranges. So that was one of the initial struggles.
And even though
is this something that people have cataloged and done the hard work on?
No,
before?
nobody's ever done it. This is definitely This is definitely breaking new ground, I will say, because the only thing that people. Well, I mean, because people have done this, but people use sound fonts. That's if you go on YouTube and you type original SNES music, it's out there. Mm-hmm. People use sound fonts, and that's taking a very, very, very small segment of the sample and using a sound font player to expand it, which can sound okay, but in my opinion, it never sounds perfect. and depending on the system you use, it can sound pretty wonky. So this method we're doing is really kind of the hard way of doing it. I wouldn't recommend anyone else to do it because it takes so long, but I will say that once you're done, I do think it sounds like really, really close to the Super Nintendo.
Well, I mean, I find it very satisfying because it was also the same thing that I had to do in Child of the Chozo for sort of the second portion of it. And it's something that I guess I wouldn't have thought because you think like nostalgia, the older back you get, the more nostalgic it's going to be. And having used stuff like FamiTracker where you're able to get authentic 8-bit stuff, I gotta say it's more satisfying having the Super Nintendo because it's this weird point where it's like the instruments have so much character and they're so identifiable because they're not just, like square waves. They actually are sort of samples.
Well, and that leads us to something else is because they're so identifiable, there's only a very specific range that you hear them in. So one of the other struggles of this project was, let's say Marty would write a melody and we wanted to use the steel drum, for example. Well, the steel drum only has a very specific range in the soundtrack. So if it's a little bit too high, it's going to sound bad. So a lot of times we'd have to come back and say, you know what, Marty, we really have to change this key. We have to bring it down like 4 half steps because that's really where the sweet spot of that sample is. So sometimes it was a process of writing not just for a specific feel or a specific level, but writing for a specific sample in the range that sounds good for that sample.
Right.
It was almost like writing for like an oboe and, this is the range of the oboe,
Oh, an oboe can't go 5 octaves higher. Gosh darn it. So for the samples, since for the SNES, composers could like bring their own samples to it. Typically, do most games have samples unique from each other, as opposed to the NES, where like
there's so many different. There's a high variety of different samples. Nintendo did have a sample pack that you hear a lot, so a lot of similar bass sounds, a lot of similar brass. But really, some of the samples in Mario World weren't used in any other games.
I always noticed it felt very
All
unique,
Stars has some similar ones. Yoshi's Island has some that they borrow from Mario World, but there are some in Mario World that you don't hear anywhere else for sure.
Did you ever like find yourself hunting other games for a sample?
Like there's a good example that in the winter track and the desert track, the percussion was not from Mario World because there is no sleigh bell in Mario World because there's no winter level. So that was from, I think, Earthbound. And the hand percussion in kind of the tabla stuff in the desert track, that was actually from Chrono Trigger.
Wow, that's really awesome. And that's I kind of gave it an alien sound to it almost. Like, wait, this is what's going on. This is slightly askew. This feels like it's from a different world.
It's like the unreleased, uncut Mario World, like where they had those levels you never got to see.
And Karl was also really careful when finding samples from other games to make sure that they really felt like they could still sit alongside the Mario World samples, so you weren't too pulled out. Another thing that Karl isn't really mentioning, but like for instance when he's saying like, if you bring the sample up then it gets faster, we certainly have the tools where we could increase the pitch without increasing the speed, but the point is we're trying to mimic the way the Super Nintendo technology worked, because for instance if you ever hear like strings, like let's say in Zelda, when they get high, like the vibrato gets almost kind of insane and sort of glitchy. So that Karl's always trying to imitate that technology, or like he was describing with the delay, so that we don't want to kind of bring like our really souped up fancy tools to the table.
Yep. I wonder if SNES composers ever look at us and just say, "No,
what are you doing?
Why are you limiting yourself?"
Absolutely. And again, it comes back to we are so out of our minds. Why are we doing this? Why are we spending so much time trying to make something sound just the right amount of crappy? Because that's really what we're trying to do. Because like Marty said, I could have made the vibrato sound better, but it's like, no, it doesn't sound like Super Nintendo unless it's this amount of crappy.
Well, I think we already covered that. You're trying to find a very specific emotion, and you can't get that emotion without the vibrato. Yeah. It's just how it works.
Well, I think especially with the Mario World instruments. I mean, I was reading an interview with Koji Kondo where he was talking about, and I just never realized what a big part he played in sort of establishing what the 16-bit era sounded like. Because he was talking about, with the NES or with synthesizers and stuff like that, there were clear limitations. You didn't have that much control over timbre and sound. But when you were dealing with the Super Nintendo and you had more more choices, he sort of thought, how do I approach, like, what type of instruments am I going to try to make it sound like? And so he came up with the idea of, you know, in a video game, in this new medium, it should really sound like something in a dream where it's just a mixture of all kinds of instruments. So that's why you get, you know, mandolin and steel drum and strings and brass. And it's just all these weird, kooky instruments that you probably wouldn't place together, but they somehow work in this context in games.
Well, and that's another great example of just like the level of care and detail and like sensitivity that Koji brings to his work. And it's funny. I mean, no matter how large of a fan you might be, I think so many of us are still going to kind of underestimate and undervalue just like the capacity for like his ideas and sensitivity in those areas. You know, it's pretty amazing.
Right, and it suits the Mario like world really well because the Mario world itself is a very eclectic mix of just different stuff. Like, here's Cookie Mountain. Look at those turtles. Okay,
yeah, super true.
Just kind of bring everything together. So.
I remember Conan O'Brien was like doing some episode where he was playing like Smash Brothers, and he's like, "What ideas do they turn down at Nintendo?"
That is a really good line. So, Karl, now that you've like figured all this out and documented this process and everything, have you considered like detailing this kind of stuff on your website and putting up
Of course not, because truthfully, no, because one of the things that I think is cool is that we've stumbled upon this long, tedious process that gets us results that not a lot of other people are able to get. So in a lot of ways, I kind of want to keep some of the secrets to ourselves, at least for the time being.
Right. Yeah. Kind of make it proprietary for at least.
But
for now.
at the same time,
really...
people have reached out to me and asked various things on Facebook and email, and I have answered their questions, and I'm definitely willing to help out anyone who's interested in trying to do this. But I would say that it's a very long and tedious process.
Well, yeah, and I think the thing is, it's not like there is some shortcut. It's like, it's not like we discovered, oh, this is how you do it.
This one weird trick will get you.
Well, it's like I always wanted to make 8-bit music, and I didn't discover a shortcut. You know, I just had to learn how to
and it's also, it's worth being said that I'm sure there are some people that maybe they know how to take a Super Nintendo and take the SPC 700 and use the chip to do actual SNES, just because we don't have that knowledge. Really cool. I'm sure there are some people that know how to do that, and that's even better.
Have to be. I mean,
obviously that's way better than what we're doing. But just using the knowledge we have, which is limited, we wanted to still make it sound 100% authentic. So we did the best we could with our limited tools. You know.
Right.
I think what we need is a series of Marty's Corners detailing how how you change the pitch of certain samples, and I think that would be fascinating.
If you have enough Marty's Corners, it just becomes Marty's Cube.
Oh, that's cute.
Marty's Tesseract. You just...
Awesome. Well, let's see here. Anything, any closing notes you guys wanted to say about this song in particular or the album in general?
I mean, I guess all I just want to say is I'm just so happy that the world, you know, no pun intended, the world gets to hear this stuff, because it's been a long journey. It's been about 6 months that we've been working on it. It is available on our website. It's pay what you want. So whatever you think this album is worth, we just really, you know, all the listeners out there, we just really want you guys to check it out. And I hope that people can enjoy it.
Well, I certainly have. So I have faith other people have good taste too.
Hopefully
we'll
so.
See. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having us.
Honestly, thanks so much for setting aside this time and really devoting this much time to our album. It's really sweet.
It's such an honor. Yeah, it's always so fun to be on this show, and especially to have an episode dedicated. We're just very, very blessed. So thank you so much.
And I love listening. I love listening to your guys' podcast. I was listening to the when you guys tried out that Rhapsody roulette idea, and I'm listening to it, enjoying it, and then it's just like, oh, what have you been listening to? And then you're like, oh, I've been listening to Karl B and the Soul Surgeons. I'm like, what? That's crazy.
Such a trip. Yeah. No, and that was a cool idea. I really enjoyed that roulette episode. You guys should keep that up.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we got some good feedback on that, and I'm really happy you guys enjoyed it. I totally had the same experience in listening to your guys' show, and it's just like, whoa, wait a minute, they have Matthew Tucson on. They were all on our show. This is so cool. I'm so glad you were able to get him on the show.
It's almost like we're cousins. Game music cousins.
There you go. Game music cousins. That's our new podcast. There's way too many hosts.
That's what we call the, extravaganzas when there's like 8 people on.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh gosh, yeah, we need to do that again sometime. That was ridiculous.
Next January.
All right.
Oh, I'm
yes,
sure.
Exactly.
I'm sure
we're still winding down after that. So give us some time. All right. Well, also Marty, it was awesome having you on. Thanks so much for giving us your time and talking about this album.
Guys, this is an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me be a part of it, and just letting us take all this time to talk about the album. Wow.
Well, see, the secret is we knew that if we could get all 3 of you on the show, we wouldn't have to do any of the work. You guys are bringing all of the material. You have all of the knowledge.
Much.
You have all of the enthusiasm behind it. We just sit here and give you questions every once in a while.
The problem is we're just going to get iTunes reviews saying, what happened to the hosts?
Oh, I mean, there's power in numbers, man.
Yeah.
You get 5 passionate individuals all talking about one thing. You don't really have to do much work.
It's really the power of podcasting. That's like the whole idea behind it. And I really enjoy it. All right, so everyone, time for, ending note stuff. Don't turn it off. This is very important. You can find us on Twitter at TrainStation88. You can email us at trainstation8@gmail.com. Steven, are you still posting on YouTube? Are you doing that?
Of course I am.
Or are you being lazy?
Yeah, I didn't forget.
Okay, good. I was just making sure you're still putting this stuff up there. So we're TrainStation8 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, you probably know that. And we are a part of the Wales Are Wales network, which is a podcasting and other internet media network that Steven and I run that has a lot of other awesome shows like this with other awesome people like
My one
us.
plug for that is going to be Third Person, a storytelling podcast. If you like storytelling, and I've noticed a lot of people do, definitely check that out. I wasn't on the last episode, or maybe I was, depending on when this comes out. But it was an episode all about unpopular opinions. And even though it meant Abigail had to talk about Frozen again, it was a really, really humorous...
Gosh darn it, I like Frozen. She just can't accept that.
It was a really good episode, and it was nice seeing it from the perspective of someone who, wasn't actually on the show. So I can now recommend it from a safe
Let
distance.
it go, Stephen.
I told her that. I told her that exact
So
thing.
Bryan,
She
are
won't
you
listen
the
to me.
Elsa and is Steven the Anna, or how does it sort of break down?
Well, I am blonde, and he is auburn, so...
That's how it works?
I guess so.
Guys,
Great color.
I'm getting a little
Also,
antsy.
I
Do you guys
have a
want to
ton
go
of-
and build a snowman? That was terrible.
I also have a bunch of emotional baggage and have crazy ice powers, so it all fits. And yes, Karl, I appreciate it. It's always fun to throw in songs.
Well, and we did actually have snow just a few days ago, which is
Wow.
strange.
That's really cool. Let's see here. Oh yeah, personally on Twitter, I am Lord Melder. Steven is Stephen Kelly 180, and you guys can now plug all the awesome stuff.
Yeah, on Twitter you can follow us at Marcato Bros. Our website is supermarcatobros.com, and we have all of our original music, all of the albums we've done. There's a lot of them at this point, as well as our podcast, the Super Marcato Brothers Video Game Music Podcast. Every week we talk about video game music, and occasionally we interview some cool people. And we're on Facebook as well as YouTube, so that's where you can find us.
What about you, Marty? You have your own stuff.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Marty B Music. It's still mine. There's like this there's Marty B rapper who really wants it, but no, I'm gonna hold on to it.
And their collaborative album is coming out this fall.
Do a collab with him, yeah.
Oh gosh, no, that would be really great. Marty B
and Marty D.
Oh man.
The Marty B's, that's even better.
Oh, guys, brilliant idea.
That should do it for us.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you everyone for listening. Steven, I'm going to leave the outro to you this week.
All right, well, I think
Need a really
first,
cool
I got
catchphrase.
3 things to say to end our show.
Okay.
Thing number 1 is, Bryan, you're exactly right. This is why I like podcasting. It's bringing similar people and similar ideas together and expanding into new people and new ideas. So this has been very fun.
I agree.
My second thing is, I forgot to mention before, but the Cocoa Wasteland Map bass is awesome.
Oh, thank you. That was one of mine. If you couldn't tell.
I could tell.
I
I could tell. And the final thing I'm going to say is we're going to be back on track with weekly episodes starting next week, and we hope to see you here. So have a lovely day and listen to some more video game music in the meantime.
That was pithy. I like it.
Thanks.